go, Jim. He's dead.
Hello and welcome to Improv Autopsy. I'm your host, Stephen Cadwell. In this episode, I talk with Ana Eligio Hammersley, a member of the SAK Comedy Lab ensemble at large who now resides in Indianapolis. She teaches and performs with various groups in the area, including Red Curb Comedy and Lady Bits. She is also co-owner of Hammersley Entertainment, LLC, which produces shows at fringe festivals, cons of various names, PopCon, Gen Con, Comic-Con, and you may have seen one of their shows they produce with Eric Novella, Designated Debaters, at a con or even the Comic-Con cruise this past February. You'll have an opportunity to experience Designated Debaters at PopCon Indy 2025 in June, the 27th through the 29th, so if you're headed there, you need to check that out. I'll leave some links in the show notes. I first met Ana during rehearsals for Guerrilla Theater at SAK Comedy Lab, where she started as a stage manager but meshed with the cast so well she became part of it. Ana is another performer who's likely to surprise you on stage in all the best ways, whether you're an audience member or a fellow performer. She is a very mischievous player, and her choices keep her scene partners on their toes in all the best ways, even when she mishears a suggestion, but I'll let her tell you about that. Ana is a powerful improviser, and whether she's playing a character with low status or high status, chances are she has the audience in the palm of her hand. If you get a chance to play with Ana or take a class from her, you should. In the meantime, please enjoy Ana Eligio Hammersley's Improv Autopsy. Ana, thank you so much for joining me. You grew up in Florida. What was your first encounter with improv? Was it Rollins or was it before?
It was actually before. I was in 4-H. Thank you very much for 10 years growing up.
What are the 4-H's?
Head, heart, health, and hands.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Great.
I could say the pledge, but, that's a whole moment. But yeah, and so I was part of 4-H, and they do this really cool leadership conference called Congress every summer, and it was a week long. You kind of had to qualify for it by doing these county and district events before, and you can do it through doing something for the talent show or doing a demonstration or cooking or all these different things that you can do to kind of qualify for that Congress Leadership Week. And so I went, and then when you're there, you got to sign up for different tracks for the week of what you want to kind of learn a little bit more about. And it was at the University of Florida campus. So we got to stay in the dorms and got to pick a track. And one was, I think, called like creative storytelling or some sort of performance-based one. I had been doing theater most of my life. The schools that I went to were theatrical based. A lot of them had some sort of arts focus. So that was something that was just very natural for me to choose. And they had their theater strike force from UF, their big improv troupe, for hosting the workshops that week for this track. And so that was the first time, other than watching Whose Line Is It Anyway on TV, that was the first time I had ever actually learned games, got to see a performance at the end of the week of that troupe, and just got to know some of the performers. And it was honestly like I had just gotten drugged or something, it was just very exciting, and it was like, ooh, this was fun, like this was new and interesting. And they were the group that taught us also had such a good variety within themselves. Like one of them I remember also educating us on just how he was a monologist. He improvised monologues and things. It was very like artistic as well, and so I was just really taken by it and really impressed. And that was a summer or two before I was going to college, and so then I started really becoming a big nerd right away and trying to reach out to some other students that were going to be going to Rollins, my private school that I went to just outside Orlando, because I wasn't sure if they had an improv troupe. And so I, at that point at my high school, started taking whatever games I learned that week, and now I was a professional improviser, and I started teaching the rest of my drama club all of these games and became, like the leader of improv, and so I just was pretending that I knew what I was doing now. And then when I was going to college, they had just a couple of years before I got there had started, Dr. David Charles had started the Rollins Improv Players, RIP group over there, which I didn't really know about. So I was like making my own moves, like about to start an improv troupe at Rollins. And then it was like, oh, extremely well established by David Charles.
Competing with Dr. D.
Yeah, no way. Then when I got to college, that was the first time that I got to really do a little bit more. And David Charles, I know you, Stephen, have worked with him a lot as well. And he does not play with his improv. He's so serious about it, and in the best way possible. So it was like a beautiful artistic boot camp doing that, and that was really like what I consider, my real training for the first time, beyond, the first taste of it from that UF workshop in the summer of high school time. So, yeah, so there you go. Baby Ana Improv.
I know that Rollins, like, he teaches a class, right? There are a few that are classes. And then was that your inroad at Rollins, or was there a extracurricular part of that before you got into the actual classes?
Well, I was a theater major going in, and so I was in Dr. David Charles's, and, in college it's really cool. Everyone calls him Dr. D, because we're like part of a sitcom with him or something. But he taught acting 1. And so he was the acting teacher as well, and of course would infuse a lot of improv exercises in his performance coaching. So that was my first experience with him, was just being an acting teacher for, I think, my acting 1 and 2 class, something like that. And during that first year, he always would audition people after their freshman year. He didn't audition people as they were coming in as freshmen. So he had kind of like told the class, like, if anyone's interested. And I do remember it clearly, because I think he said, oh, are you going to audition? And I said, no, I'm not funny on command. I'm an artiste over here, Like, I always felt comfortable, like, doing comedy as scripted work, but never, even though I had done a little bit in high school and things, I didn't feel. And I had seen the Rollins Improv Players at that point perform, and I was like, oh, wow, they're on a different level. Like, what I did in high school was not this. But he said, well, do you want to audition? I was like, I don't know, I'm not funny on command. And he said, well, we're not a comedy troupe, we're an improv troupe. And I was like, okay. And that was truthful. I mean, he allowed that group to find the fun and find the game and find the bit, but also was very encouraging of finding the rawness and realness of scenes and letting it to be a sad scene, letting it be kind of dramatic. And that was really fun, especially as a young improviser, but also as a young performer, just as an actor. It was like such a great way to try on different characters and personalities and situations and see how you'd really react. So it was a fun little, almost falling into it in a way. Like, had I not had that class, had I not had these experiences, I don't know if I would have really gone down the path. Yeah.
What do you think it was that had given you the idea of being funny on command? Was it just from what you'd seen, or did you get that from someone in particular?
I don't think it was ever told to me that was part of it. I think that's just the little experience that I had was watching Whose Line, or seeing these performers at UF, or seeing the Rollins Improv Players performing a few times. I think that was about the extent of my improv experience at that point, of like just watching as an audience member. And I think they were just so playful and lively, and the laughs were just very authentic and were just there. It was always really successful shows. So in my mind, it was always a magic trick that I was watching, where it seemed like that was what was happening, until learning more about improv. I think that's the beauty of it, is that the more you learn about it, the more you just understand how everyone is just doing a truthful job on stage. But until you know that, it just seems like magic. Oh my gosh, how are these people just so, how did they say that? How did they think of that? I think it was my own doubt of just, it seemed like a lot of pressure. I'm a planner, I'm very strategic in a lot of the things that I do, and so it didn't seem like something that I could be successful at. So it was definitely in my own head more, for sure.
I think that is one of the things that intimidates people the most about improv, is the comedy aspect and that idea that you have to be funny on command and need to be funny on command.
Yeah.
My first introduction to improv was in college as well. I'd seen Whose Line, of course, but I hadn't really connected the dots yet. So it was the first acting class at Western, and I think it was required even before acting 1, and it was just improv. And our instructor, Lyda Stillwell, it was always improv as theater. It was never improv as comedy in that class. It was different than anything that would have been like a SAK class, for instance. So I love that David Charles is on that same page, and I think it's very healthy to get that kind of education for improv as well, that this is theater, not necessarily comedy, and that's what the goal is: produce good theater.
Well, and I think it's very obvious when you are playing with someone who has not been trained that way. because they are looking for the laugh or they're looking for a bit, and they do have a little bit of a problem of finding that narrative or finding just what the other person is really offering. There's a lot of listening that goes away when you're not really thinking of it as theater, I think, when you're not thinking of it as like, what is the situation and who are these people and why do they care? So yeah, I agree. I'm glad that was my foundation. And maybe this is your next question, but when I started the next big step, I feel like, in my improv career past college, which was an incredible experience altogether. I mean, we did a full murder mystery improvised show as part of the 75th anniversary of our college, and it was a David Charles special. It was full blown. It was very seriously done.
Yeah.
But it was such a peak of that college career for me as far as improvising. But then my next big step in my career was when I started with Guerrilla Theater at SAK Comedy Lab. Lovely David Charles had offered to just let me be a stage manager for the production. And so I jumped on that opportunity now that I was out of college. And it was such a small group. I think there were 7 to start or something, including me. And he let me rehearse and do exercises and scene work with the group. And pretty early on, you guys accepted me into the fold. And I remember thinking, like, oh my goodness, this is like SAK quality improvising, but with a Rollins Improv Player heart, like that David Charles, like real, like heart of it. And the fact that it was like all of these talented people together with a very similar sensibility of, I think, exactly as you said, you know, kind of that like theater first improv comedy, like layered on that. We were all on the same page. And so it really was a special little group that we got to be part of.
One of the things I find really ironic about Guerrilla, for me personally, is with Offsides, I was reading some of the books, and I read the Johnstone book where he describes guerrilla theater, and I just was summarizing for everyone in the group, and, you know, for those that didn't have the book or couldn't read it or whatever, and just, you know, main points and that kind of thing. And when it got to the chapter on Guerrilla, I think my summary was, Johnstone says that this is advanced improv. Nothing that needs a gorilla suit is advanced improv.
I mean, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
However, that person has not ever met David Charles.
Well, you know, then the experience of it was completely different than just reading it, because it was some of the most fun I had at SAK was in that show. And I also, Kayla and I developed kind of a different show that really plays on some of the themes from Guerrilla that we produced in Chicago, and we're constantly throwing it out there to see if anyone will bite and want to do it again. So far, no luck, but the basic gist of it is you're throwing, like some of the most fun we had as directors playing with people, throwing out things that could be hurdles to the scene but end up just producing really, really great work from people.
That sounds fun. Does it have a name?
Improv Sabotage.
Oh, sassy.
Yeah. Yeah, we try.
I like it.
So was your first show that you were in, was that pre-college then? Did you get your high school group into a show situation, or did you have to wait for college?
Yeah, I think college was my first show. Yeah. This is a David Charles ad, by the way, at this point.
I'll talk to him at some point. I haven't yet. I intend to.
Oh, you got it. You got it. Oh, he goes so deep. It's so good. But the way he does it is he auditions at the end of the year, and then he does like a hardcore training with everyone a couple of weeks prior to typical freshman orientation. So you kind of go back to campus a couple of weeks early for that sophomore year or whatever year you're starting the school year of college. And then you do it's pretty intense workshops for a week or two in order to learn a format that you will then perform at the orientation for freshmen. So it's like one of the events that they do coming in. And so it was strangely like the most intense, but also the most exciting, because we knew we had a really large built-in, warm, fresh audience that was going to be going through freshman college students that were excited to be there and that were young and seeing us as upperclassmen. And so there was already like this built-in support system with those first performances. So, I mean, it was really, really fun. I just remember some of the upperclassmen that had been part of the troupe for a couple of years, like just making a few choices that surprised them was like so exciting to me. And like, just finding your own style a little bit and your own like quirk and like what works for you. doesn't always work for everybody. And so finding like your own things that work and don't work, and just, it was a very like open field as far as what you could try. And so, but also at the same time, staying within a pretty solid structure. So you always felt like that's something that David Charles has always been such a fan of, is like very structured improv. And so there was always like this safe framework to fall back on, even if a scene was just treading water the whole time, okay, then we move on to the next thing. So, but it was all long form as well. So that was something that was definitely more of a comfort for me in the beginning, was very structured long form improv. That was what I did mostly in like that training over the next few years. That was a big focus. We would do short form shows, but it was more on the outskirts. It was pretty rare. It was kind of like on occasion. And so we still had games and things that we knew and learned, and we'd throw those in sometimes. But for the most part, the main focus was that long form. But that was the first time I ever did it in front of an audience, and it was always college students. So that reference point was perfect because I was a college student at the time. So the audience were peers, and they were pretty well attended for most of the time that I was there. There was a year or two that I don't know if we just fell off the marketing radar or whatever, but I remember there was a time where we had, I think, 8 or 9 people on stage and 5 in the audience. And it was like, never good if you outnumber the audience for an improv show. Those were tough. But then we started really doing some more grassroots promoting and got more people in the seats, and that's a magical element that maybe no one likes to talk about in improv, but just if you don't have a big audience, it's going to be really hard to have a good show. If you have a big audience, it's going to be really hard to have a bad show.
Yeah, so it makes a difference.
It's such a huge difference, just is like literal size of audience, which doesn't seem fair, but that's the reality of it. Yeah, but that was the first time, so I got kind of like a very rock star feel in my first few performances, which is not very common, I think, for, college improv. So I felt very lucky with having that kind of improv boot camp that we did, that kind of paid off with these really fun performances to start.
How was orientation done then at Rollins? Was it a multi-day thing, and the shows that you were doing were just there as a possibility for people to attend?
I think it was, and I may be incorrect. When you have David Charles on, he can correct all the things that I've said so far. But if I remember correctly, it was a required stop on their list. Like, Rollins is a very small school, and they have small class sizes, so their freshman orientation was very structured as well, with the freshmen go from this class that's coming in, that's going to be part of this group. Like, every freshman has to be part of a freshman type class, and I forget even the name of it, but they have like a couple upperclassmen that are in the class with them to kind of be mentors, and they will be in that class for the first semester. And so you have a class where once or twice a week you're going to this class, and you have other peers, and there's some sort of theme of that. Like, David Charles would teach one called Improvology, where it was an improv acting class that was that track. But so you kind of like group together as freshmen with these like classes, and then those classes were told, go to this class and then come to the improv thing and then go to this and go to lunch. And, it was very structured. So we were kind of a required stop for everyone. But it also worked as such a great marketing tool as people were coming in, because then, they saw it, they had a great experience, they know that we were fun and good, and anytime they would see it in the future, then it was like, oh yeah, let's do that on a Friday night, let's go see that improv show. So it kind of helped to also build a little bit of the knowledge base for the school to know that we existed and know that we were quality. So that was always really nice too.
So those times when you had such a small audience, were people just skipping even though they were supposed to be there?
That was later.
Oh,
so that was just during orientation were those performances. But during the year, we would have performances too.
Oh, gotcha.
So we would have in the semester and things. That's when the drop-off kind of happened. And then, I got real annoying with this was early days of Facebook too. So this was like, I was messaging every friend I had and like, hey, come and see the show. Like, hey, I'd really like you to be there. Really making it personal. And it really worked. We got a little bit more hands-on as the performers as well, like inviting people, and that started turning the tide a little bit to where then it became kind of cool to then come to the shows, and we would have pretty full houses after that. We would perform in the Black Box Theater at Rollins, which seated about, I don't want to say like 80 to 100, I don't recall exactly, but a pretty nice sized house for what we were doing. So it was this little drop off that would happen like mid semesters and stuff. Sometimes the performances would be like Friday afternoon. People were like going home, or sometimes the timing wasn't perfect. So had to figure those things out.
Do you know, or can you recall, between when you were saying no, you weren't going to audition, and now you're doing shows, was there a moment where things clicked for you, or an idea that really just resonated with you that you were like, yeah, I'm going to invest more into this? Do you remember that moment for you, if it exists?
I was pretty hooked from the beginning because of the little taste that I'd gotten. And then when I got that encouragement from David Charles to audition and everything, I think I was pretty sold from the beginning in general, just because the spirit of that cast was, David Charles is really good at fostering a spirit within the team. And that was really, especially being a college kid away from my family and away from my hometown, that became my family. Those became my closest friends. And so it's something that was already like built into that was like, oh, well, these are my people, these are my people. And in general, like a lot of those people were the theater people, and those were really my people were the theater people, because I was a theater major at a small school. So we were all working on all the shows together, just rotating through who was on stage, who was backstage, you kind of just are doing all the jobs all the time. There was a particular scene, again, like it was with an upperclassman, where to me, I was just very proud of my own like quirk in it. So the way that the format would go would, someone would stop the previous scene with a bell and then stand up and say, that reminds me of the time, and then would kind of like offer a premise for a scene and then call players up. That reminds me of a time of Steven and Kayla went to the coffee shop for their first date, or whatever it was, and then those people would come on stage and they would do the scene. And someone had offered kind of like, we'll say, I don't know, the cool dude of the class, like he was a junior or senior, and they said, he was going through his midlife crisis or something, and so then he pretended to get on a motorcycle and start revving solo on stage, like having this like moment of him on the road. And I went up and playing a little girl on stage. And so I went up and pretended to like put a quarter in a machine and was like, Mister, it's my turn, Mister. And just like undercut his moment of being on the road on a motorcycle to being like he was in an arcade on some little weird motorcycle toy, and just like made his midlife crisis even more pathetic with doing that. And it was just this moment where all of the upperclassmen were like, ooh, you are cold, like that was brutal, and it was just really fun, because I was just like, that to me was something that kind of unlocked in myself of like some sort of like approval of my own sense of humor in a way that I didn't really give myself before, of just like, I don't know, giving myself permission to play with something that I thought was funny and didn't judge myself too hard, and just like going for it and making a fun choice. So that was the first moment that I felt like I was like, okay, yeah, I can play with these older guys. Like I can do quirky, funny stuff too, and I can have my own sense of humor and style, and fits with these other energies too. So that was the part that kind of like unlocked for me. And I think it was even just in a rehearsal, not even in a performance. But that was a moment that I was like, yeah, this is fun. This is a fun game, So I think that's what got me hooked.
I feel like great improv is happening on multiple levels. There's the scene out front, which is ostensibly, that's the thing out. The characters interacting with the characters. But underneath that, there's also a layer of the players playing with the other players. And that feels like in that moment, you were really playing with the other player as well. And that always, in my mind, most of the time leads to just really great improv, because you're mischievous and you're playing with it.
Well, can I tell you that I honestly didn't even, in that example, like I didn't even think of it as like messing with that guy. I thought of it truly as like, I just want to make him, he's going through midlife crisis. Like, how can I increase that? But I say that because the first time I ever really experienced the like player on player action was with you, because you did something that like I remember so vividly. And like one of my core Stephen Cadwell memories is when we were first in rehearsals for Gorilla. I think it was we were doing a the radio play. Yeah. The radio play game where, I think I was doing sound effects for the game, and you were giving me such crap in the scene about like the sound I'm making and, and everything I was doing. You would kind of like undercut it and like say it sounded like something else, or, kind of like did the player on player game, like did the picking and prodding at me and like poking holes in everything that I was doing. And as a very junior member, I remember during the scene in my mind, I was like, I am screwing this up for myself. Like I am,
no.
and I genuinely was like, I'm trying to do my best. Like I'm doing okay. And so like every next sound, I was like, okay, do better on it. Like, yeah, and I was just so not used to that style. Like I was not used to that sort of game of the player on player. And so this was my first time really playing with SAK people and stuff. And that's very much that spirit, which is, as you said, that multiple layer. It's like a whole extra layer that is super fun to watch and play and create something fresh and different in the same sort of games that we're doing over and over again. But it was the first time I had ever experienced that. And so I was just like, and so after the scene, everyone was like, ha ha ha, oh, and then Steve was giving you crap and blah, 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 blah. And like, that's like this extra thing that we could do. And I was like, oh, I didn't know. I was like, I didn't realize you were just being an improviser. I thought you were just telling me on stage that I was really needing to be better.
You thought I was the biggest dick in the room.
I kind of did. I was like, dude, I am trying. You are not yes-anding me. You were just telling me I'm doing it wrong. Then everyone was like, ha ha, great job, Steven. And I was like, what? Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, we were all in on that game. I was playing the game too. I was really playing it.
I almost ruined a gorilla for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But that I think because I'm actually am paranoid about hurting people like in unknowingly on stage like that. So this could just be me trying to cover my butt intentional, like for intentions and stuff. But I feel like I must have had enough faith in your abilities that it didn't prevent me from going there and doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's what it was. Honestly, I like looking back and like how we played together in the future. You know, like how we played since that rehearsal onward. Like, and you as a player, like you were always very conscious of that extra game, and I felt like you were one of the players that was part of that group, and just SAK in general, that you were always trying to like pick at the seams a little bit more than maybe some of the others. And so once I understood your game of that, then it was like, okay, now I get like respect, like, and I didn't take it as any, I think I did take it almost as like, oh, he thought I was ready for that, like, oh, he thought I was like ready to play. And I appreciated that, as a kind of junior member. So it was, no, I didn't take it personally after I understood what the game was, but just took a little panic moment of understanding it, that's all.
Does anything stick out in terms of something that went sideways or went not great that in retrospect now you either have learned from or find hilarious?
I mean, I think everyone has a moment where they've gone too dark. Where it's like, I know backstage at SAK we always had like a running list of like types of diseases that are funny and types that are not.
Yes,
not
there's
funny.
an actual physical list, I think.
Yep, a physical list, because we learned the hard way for each of those things that, this is not funny.
Yeah.
A funny version of, and a not depressing one. A funny one was like just something that was a funny misunderstood moment on stage.
Yeah.
It was in a gorilla show, and we were doing a fairy tale scene, and it was a Snow White scene, and then we did it a few different ways after that, where we would layer on the same scene with a couple different genres or emotions and things. And so we were doing Snow White. I was playing Snow White, the scene, whatever. It was like scene in a minute of this fairy tale, layering on different genres. And we were getting the first one from the audience. And this, at SAK, we always said it was a PG-13 or better show. And so we would like toe the line, but it was never anything overtly sexual or overtly like cursing or anything. And so anyway, the first suggestion that was received was porn. And I was like, and I looked at everyone and I was like, are you serious? Like, oh, retaking this? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. And so I was like, oh, okay. All right, great. And so then we did it, and the lights went red on stage, and I was like sweeping and like leaning over and being all sexy, but trying to toe the line and, doing the whole scene. not realizing until after all 3 scenes were done and they recapped it that they were like, all right, and the first genre of horror and the next one of this. And I realized that the person had said horror and not porn in the audience as a suggestion. And I had played the entire thing as a porno in my mind, where everyone else had played it as a horror scene. And in replaying it, it made more sense. Like, the lights had gone red. Everyone was, like, eerier and weirder. But I was also like, I don't know. Maybe this is what everyone's into. I don't So that was my bad for not checking. But it was, that was a fun one.
Did anyone say anything in the green room afterward about, Anna, were you on the same page with everyone?
Oh, no, I realized it. I owned up to it immediately. I was like, guys, let me tell you what I was doing. Let me tell you how off I was. And then once I owned it, everyone was like, oh, I was wondering why you were doing this. Oh, okay, now I understand. But really what we learned was that there's not a big difference between horror films and porn movies.
Yeah, I was going to say there's an element of that in horror for sure.
There you go. I really appreciate guerrilla theater because it forces you to be a host, where at SAK, a lot of the times that we were performing as players, we had a host that was dedicated to that role. So we didn't have to do a lot of hosting, and in college, that was not something that we did very much. And in guerrilla theater, we had to host our own scenes and set up our own scenes and then direct them from the side. So it really, and I remember very clearly in the beginning of those, like, it was really hard because it's improv, but it's also not. At the same time, it's a whole different mindset of setting up a game and also still kind of endearing the audience without losing them in those ways. So it's a whole separate skill for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the Proust Questionnaire. So these can be quick or short or long answers, however you want to do. They might be a little deeper, but it's all in good fun. So go as deep as you want, but don't feel you have to.
Okay.
Anna, how do you get into the proper headspace to play?
Connecting with everyone in the green room before is always a good one. And truly doing warm-ups, I do feel like really does help. That's not something we did all the time, but I wish we would have done that more. Our good friend Greg Yates, the late Greg Yates, was always really, really good about that. And that's something that I definitely missed after he passed, was this sort of like commitment to the warm-up. And here in Indiana, the company I've been working with, Red Curb Comedy, they were always really good about doing a quick warm-up beforehand. And I do think that really helps.
Is there one in particular that you prefer?
Ooh, they sing a song here, and I always feel like getting that started, especially when you're doing musical improv, I think is always really helpful, because for those of us that I feel like I've had to really learn that skill, there's always a little bit of doubt in my own mind before I go on stage, and so having that moment of like no pressure creating a song together, I think is always my favorite thing to do if it's possible. If it's not musical improv, then they also do a mind meld, which is just a simple quirky way of getting on the same page, literally. So that's really been helpful for me.
That's awesome. What is your favorite get for?
I'm a simple girl. Like, I feel like I just need relationship or an environment and like let the rest ride a little bit. But when I teach, a lot of times that's what I hear myself getting a lot of times to help the new players too. So I think that's where I lean when I'm instructing as well, is like I want to give them as much tools to start. And so I usually lean for a relationship and an environment, because if you don't have those, it's really hard to do the rest. So I think those are my go-tos.
Do you have a favorite relationship?
I mean, anything romantic is just simple, because then it kind of writes its own story in a way that just feels like there are lots of possibilities there, and there's like a commonality already set. So that's, to me, just fun, like whether it's a loving relationship or a not loving relationship or unrequited love, or we're now getting divorced, like whatever it is, like I feel like that has always been something very easy to play for me. But just the closest relationship, and those what I really, really like is that they are high stakes. Like, it feels high stakes. Like, there's nothing greater than love on the world. So it's like, if you're witnessing these people either about to fall in love or losing that love, like, it feels really big and important every time. And so I think that's why it sounds like such a simple, lame answer, but it's always important. It always feels important. So it's always interesting to play and find the different character and the different relationship that night, that different color of it that night. But those are always really special to me. And then same goes for family relationships, like mother-child or siblings, things like that. But I would say parent relationships and romantic relationships always feel like they just are more important, and because that's who we are as a species. So I think those are always my favorite go-tos.
How do you differentiate for your classes the difference between how people are related and relationship the way that we mean it in improv?
I think I stole this from David Charles. I don't even remember at this point, but I always talk about relationship plus factors, where naming the fact of who you are, naming the relation at the beginning, but then who has the status between the two of you? What is that factor? You're mother-daughter, but does that mean do you love your mother or do you hate your mother? How do you feel about your mother today in real life? Like, use that, that's usually going to be a little muddier and grittier and more interesting to kind of find whatever that plus factor is. And, same with siblings, like who's the older sibling, who's the younger sibling. All of those I consider like in that plus factor of like, yes, the fact is you are these things, you are a married couple, but are you newly married? Or have you been married for 15 years? Like, are you, like, who is slumming in this relationship? Who has the status? Who wears the pants? Like, all of those things that naturally we don't think about in our day-to-day lives with these relationships that we maintain. But on stage, it's really, really pretty important to establish those things immediately.
Yeah.
Once you just make a choice, and I always even diffuse it down to love and hate. Like, do you love or hate this person? And that usually propels that relationship and colors it a little deeper than just this kind of after-school special version of like, hi, Mom, you're my mom, so therefore, naturally, we just speak in these high voices and just love each other and no questions asked, like, thanks for the cookies. It's just like not like that usually. So making sure that people understand those plus factors.
Yeah, I don't think you're old enough to know what an after-school special is, but I appreciate the analogy.
Well, I realize after-school special is probably, again, more dramatic than what I was letting on there, but I do remember after-school specials. I'm older than you think.
What is your least favorite suggestion?
Taxidermy. Hands down.
How often?
Who has ever talked to a taxidermist? Who has ever gotten taxidermy done? Like, 99% of you giving taxidermy as a suggestion have zero experience with taxidermy.
Is this a suggestion you get often?
I feel like it had a solid 8 years out there. That was like a really, like when people were trying to be funny and giving a suggestion, they would yell taxidermy. I don't know why. Did you never get taxidermy?
I feel like I must have, but it was just not on my radar.
Oh, wow. Okay. Maybe I got too many too fast, and then I just got triggered by it every time, and so it really sat with me. But I feel like it was fairly common for a while. It was a big one.
No kidding.
Glad you didn't have the taxidermy ride that I went on.
I do have memories of getting that suggestion now, but no kidding, when I drive to my folks' place, which is further up in Michigan, I drive by this establishment with a huge sign that just says taxidermy on it.
Oh, there you go.
Never been in
Got
it.
the guy that's been yelling suggestions for the past 20 years.
He really loves improv. He goes to a lot of shows.
And he's very passionate about his work. See, now this is my bad. My bad, everybody.
Sorry, taxidermist.
My biggest fan. I just didn't know.
How would you describe your onstage persona? Who is onstage Ana versus offstage Ana?
I'm definitely snarkier on stage. I feel like in my real life, I'm way too afraid to be snarky. But on stage, I love being snarky. I love being dark. I love being like, one of my favorite things to do is like, again, playing a child character that's like just a little twisted is like my favorite thing. And it's like, why? What does that say about me? I don't know. We don't need to dive that deep, but yeah. So, I mean, I think I definitely have like a little darker sense of humor on stage and a little like snarkier on stage. I wear like that poking other players on stage and kind of like messing with them. Like, I really, really enjoy that.
It's a safe place to be snarky.
Yes. Yeah. And fair or not fair, but I feel like most of my improv career, I was in my 20s, early 30s on stage, and as like a kind of ingenue looking girl that wears well with snarky and and with a darker sense of humor. I think there's like things that I could play that were then kind of like that surprising element that if someone else played on stage, they would come off as kind of a jerk, or they would, where everyone kind of gets to find their own thing that works for them. And rules can be broken all the time with that, but in general, I felt like the audience would be receptive to. However, I will say I did learn the hard way that I can't start with snark and darkness in a show.
Oh, what was that lesson?
Well, it was just like over time I realized that, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion for other female improvisers, but especially when I started at SAK, there were not many other females playing at the time. There were a handful now with guerrilla theater. There were a few of us that were kind of moving from guerrilla theater to ensemble. Jenny and Jamie and Robin had been there forever and was kind of like established as like the main female performer that I recall, at least. And there was Lisa Glaze, she would come in, and Gina was there too. Like there were other performers, but they just weren't as consistent at SAK that I saw for a long time. And so coming in as a pretty young girl on stage, I do remember like anytime I would start, because a lot of times we'd start with blind freeze as a game, and anytime I would start with kind of a snarkier character or a bit more like off-center character in those scenes, like it would not endear the audience. They would not get me. They would not like be on my side. I would not be able to like have them ride with me the rest of the show if I started out in this weird way where they didn't know what I was doing. But I realized, like, if I started the show doing blind freeze or doing scene work where I was an ingenue, if I was a young lover, if I was a daughter, if I was something that was very easy for them to understand, like, and I gained their trust in, like, oh, okay, so she can hang with these other guys on stage and she can perform and she is funny and she's not doing something that makes me feel weird. Like, okay, now we get it. And then later in the show, I could get weird. But like, it was just this weird like science experiment that I feel like over time I figured out in a way, like at least for myself, that if I went out a little too bold, I know that sounds horrible, but like if I went out a little too bold, it like shocked the system a little bit in the audience and didn't endear them to me in the beginning. And I think it was more successful for me to then kind of play something very simple to start, and then I could become an alien monster in the last scene, and then they were on my side. But if I started with that, they would be like, what is she doing? I thought she was a girl. What? I don't understand. So it was kind of a weird experiment, but that's what I feel like I discovered along the way after hundreds of shows.
Yeah, it's always been easier for guys to play women on stage than vice versa. Do you think what you were feeling was part of that sort of sexism, or was it your youth, a combination of both?
Oh no, I definitely feel like it was. It was, and not to say it was, it's a whole audience body that every night did this. So it wasn't any one person that was sexist. It was just, this was, 2010 when I started. And so it was just, the world wasn't as accepting of female comedy at that point. Like, I feel like now it's a different vibe, but then it was, you just had to work a little harder, honestly, to get that trust with the audience at the beginning. And I did feel like it, because it wasn't the same with some of the other players on stage. Of course, some of the others had been there for, I was going to say Chris Dinger, but Chris Dinger was also there for a million years. Like, most of the audience knows him already. But as an example, he comes out as an alien monster in the first scene. Everyone's like, oh, this is lovely. Like, this is, oh, we get it. He's a man and he's so funny. And I think it was just when I would try to make those like kind of bolder, quirkier, androgynous, weirder kind of like really outlandish choices to start, even if it felt like the gesture called for it, or even, if that was what I would have naturally done, I would consciously kind of soften it in the beginning in order to gain that trust with the audience. And when I started doing that, I did feel a difference in just the reaction I would get on stage from the audience. And just like, and I do feel like it was literally me being like, hey, it's okay. I'm up here. I can hang with these guys. Like, don't you worry. Like, we're good. Like, yes, I'm a girl. Like, here we go. Like, in my mind, it was like this, like, context that was having to kind of be played out for a long time. For a couple of years, I feel like I was, like, very consciously playing that game. But yeah, I definitely think it came from a sexist place, like, unknowingly. I don't think anyone was, like, intentionally not giving me a shot. I think it was just not, it was, like, unexpected that I was up there to begin with. So they had to kind of, like, recalibrate when they were watching me, and so I gave them time to recalibrate. And then I did my thing. So yeah,
that needs to be a chapter or two in the improv book that you write, because let's be honest, we need more improv books written by women.
Yeah, I do always fear, though. I fear that, like, even me saying that, like, I don't know, because I don't want to, like, apologize for being a woman up there, but I did feel like, in a way, it was almost like I placated to the reaction, you know, like, I wanted to play the best show for the audience, and I'm a committed player in that way, where I wanted to be the best product for SAK. I did feel like I had to bend in a way, which makes me feel like almost not proud. It's like, okay, I'll be the girlfriend in this scene, you know, it's like, okay, like, which I enjoy those scenes, so it's fine, but it was just, I did have to edit myself a little bit to make sure I was being soft in the beginning, and then I could ramp up to being a little bit more bold and weird.
Do you think there was anything that the rest of us on stage with you could have done to allow you to be more of what you were going for versus having to demur?
I don't think so, because I never felt that from, very, 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 very rarely did I ever feel that from any other member on stage. I always felt from the beginning, which is why I think it was surprising to me when I would go out there and be my bold self in the beginning, and I wouldn't get the reaction that I was expecting almost, or like that what I thought was earned, or when I was kind of figuring it out, it was because I felt very trusted on stage with my other players. Like, I felt like supported on stage with my other players. Like, I always felt, whether it was my own ego back in the day or whatever, I felt like I belonged there. And even though I probably didn't, you know, like, I did feel like, especially going from the guerrilla side into the regular ensemble, I think that is what made me feel ready, because I know that group was made up of some of my favorite SAK members. And so I was like, oh, okay, if I can hang with them and I feel good about this group, then I can do anything. I can do anything on stage here. So I felt very supported. I didn't feel like there was anything to be done. It's not something that people could change the audience's mind on. And I feel like I figured it out, and I was kind of proud of myself for figuring out my own formula that worked for me. And not to say that works for any female performer. I think there are other female performers that can go out there and do the bold thing right away, because they have their own style that kind of suits that, where I come off very ingenue. Like, that's my personal fashion style. That's my personal, like, kind of look. And so I think I just had to work within that and then not against it. And once I did that, I felt like I was able to kind of, like, win them over. And it was like my own personal pride to do that, and instead of, like, fighting against it just for some principle. So I don't know. To end that, I think I felt very supported on stage by the other members, guys, women, everybody. Everyone was, like, very, very supportive, and I don't think there was anything that could have changed that process.
Okay, good. First, and I do want to say that you absolutely deserve to be there. And I just want to make sure that we weren't the ones making you mom, grandma, girlfriend.
No.
Good.
No, I felt very comfortable being a weird alien around all you guys.
I guess this dovetails in a little bit. What inspires you on stage?
Honestly, I love, and we kind of touched on it, just when players are playing with each other. And when you see the twinkle in each other's eye of, like, oh, are we going to do it? Okay, all right, here we go. You know, like, that moment of really, like, playing with each other on stage and finding that perfect little twist in the scene that just hits, it's magical. It's a magical thing. And that's the part that's so addicting. And when you get to be a part of it, you build the ship together. And so when you are on stage with a partner that you trust, and you are both, like, secretly in your eyes, like, knowing where you're about to go with it, and then you do, and it hits, it's really, really fun. That's what's always, like, the part that I keep going back to, is that, like, hope of those moments.
The twinkle in your eye when you hear porn as a suggestion.
Exactly. Okay, guys, all right, here we go. I'm gonna sex it up over here, guys. Okay.
Because the audience loves it when you do that.
I guess so. Right? There we go. See? Wow. Now I'm having a really bad through line of just placating a sexist audience.
That's the lesson I wanted you to learn.
Great. I hope that's the little, like, you know, tag you use for the episode.
Sexist through line?
Yeah. Sexist through line.
Speaking of, what shuts you down or takes you out of it on stage?
Not being listened to. Making a suggestion and someone just blindly on their own path, just completely ignoring me. There have been times where, And so this is, now I'm just on a sexist mindset, I suppose. But there have been times where a performer is like on their own path that they just are not listening anymore. And that's when it's really unsettling on stage. Because then it's like, I've been in scenes where I have started a scene with someone and then another person will come in and then it's like their show. And what I had established from the beginning, my relationship that I had established in the beginning, like sort of like literally fades to the side. And to a point where there was a time on stage where I almost like literally just walked off stage because I was like, I'm not needed here. I'm literally just standing on stage now while these other guys are having their own who's bigger match over here. And what am I doing? It was kind of frustrating to just like wanting to be a supportive scene partner and like, hey, this is where the laughs are going now. This is the bit that's happening now. But that's what shuts me down is when it's like, okay, now I'm no longer important on stage and you're not even listening to me. That's what's really frustrating.
Do you find that you still stay on stage in those moments? Hopefully they're not happening often anymore. Or do you leave stage?
I think I have enough confidence now to insert myself a little bit more forcefully now back in or be able to match what's going on a little bit more. I've been doing this, I'll say, professionally at SAK since 2010. And so, I mean, it's been so many years of performing where I just feel like there are just seasons where you feel less confident on stage. And then there are seasons where you're like very confident. And so I think some of that happened when I was in a less confident place anyway. And so I didn't feel comfortable, like where I did just want to walk off stage where I'm like, I don't even know what to, like, I feel inadequate now. And I think now that I've had so many years under my belt and I care less, you know, like, I think a lot of it is like, no, you didn't hear me. Let me say it again 5 times in your face. Like now I'm kind of like, I know the audience heard me, so I know this is now established. So we gotta make it a thing now. So you have to hear me too, so we can ride on this. I think I'm a little bit more, I don't know, I'm a little more badass about it now. but before I was a little more polite, I think.
You may have answered this somewhat already, but in your estimation, what makes a good scene partner?
Playfulness is, I would say, number one, and listening. Those are the easiest things. And it's hard to have a conversation with you, Stephen, and not also be thinking of playing with Greg, because that was a lot of our time together. And he is just like the embodiment of that sort of playfulness and trust. And it was never prescriptive like what he did, but it was always fresh and interesting and fun. But I think the basis of it was that he was always such a great listener and really just like cared about being a big kid on stage and playing. I think, again, that's the twinkle in the eye kind of magic that I think that makes a really great partner, is that sort of like just readiness to just go down together, even in a flame of a bad scene. Like, as long as you're like doing it honestly with each other, I think it still can be rewarding.
Yeah. So we'll remove Greg from this equation, but if you could do a scene with anyone who is no longer with us, who would it be?
Oh, wow. Who is no longer with us?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be recently departed, but anyone in the pantheon of dead people.
I guess, honestly, I was going to say Robin Williams, just because I don't know of him as like an improviser on stage, but I just feel like it would test me in a different speed of improv. Just like the way he would go, ba 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 ba, you know, to different millions of things. And it would not be a good scene, but I do think it would be funny. I think it would kind of like unleash a different level of like ADHD improv that I try to hold back. So I think that would be my answer.
That's awesome. And you're not the first person to respond with that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
If you could do a scene with anyone currently living, who would it be?
I mean, I love me some Mike Carr scenes. I feel like Mike is one of my favorite people to play with. I mean, really anyone in Gorilla is like my favorite, because I think it was just like such a special group. But Mike has always just, I think he is just such an incredible talent, and I think he knows when to be super playful and goofy and completely sensational, but then like he can turn on a dime and make it very real and raw and like a great acting performance at the same time. And Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. So Mike Carr, but now I'm also like, oh, Joel is so fun too. And Chris, obviously Chris is great. Chris Dinger and Joel Warren and Emily Fontano and all the people that really, I mean, SAK Comedy Lab, which we've referenced a lot, like that group is just so special in general. So everyone there has like, I've had special scenes with, and that I love anytime I'm visiting, like I force myself on that stage because I just love playing with everyone. I feel like it always is such a special spirit of improv. The spirit of improv lives at SAK Comedy Lab. Said the New York Times once, and so it's on the walls everywhere.
Yeah. One of the things I love about Mike as well is that either intentionally or subconsciously, he kind of wears his emotions on his face, so it's really easy to play with that in a scene.
Yeah. You know, I never thought about that, but that is very true. You never have to guess. That's true.
Yeah.
And I think I'm similar. Honestly, I think of like this one scene that he and I did a million years ago where I think I was a banana and he was a jar of peanut butter or something. Like, we were inanimate objects. And it was one of my favorite scenes I've ever done because it was like the most honest, real scene. And it was beautifully absurd at the same time. But we just like jumped in it. And for whatever reason, we were these inanimate objects in the pantry, and it was like this love story. I mean, it was just like a full-on drama, and it was just lovely. But that kind of is his spirit, and that's like my particular style and quirk too, so it's always really fun to play with him.
I love inanimate object scenes. They can get so deep, and it's so, yeah.
I don't do enough, really. I don't do enough.
If you could do a scene with anyone fictional, who would it be?
Okay, can I tell you the honest answer? Is Bandit from Bluey. Because he seems like a great improviser already. He's very playful with his kid. He kind of reminds me of like if Mike Carr as a dad. Like, I feel like Mike Carr as a dad in a few years, if he lived in Australia, like that's Bandit from Bluey. I don't know if you've ever seen Bluey. He improvises all the time. Like, he is yes-anding his kids and like the imaginary play and like all of it all the time. And I like so many moments in this silly cartoon that I watch with my 4-year-old, like so many moments I'm like, hey, respect. That was a good move, my friend. That was a really good, sophisticated improv move. I'm so proud.
I have not seen it, but I do know what Bluey is.
Okay, yeah. Watch an episode, you'll see.
What do you find most helpful from the booth?
Ooh, man. Anything that you can get from the booth helps. Anything. Any light wash of a color, the underscoring, if that's considered booth, like musical underscoring, game changer.
Yeah.
It just elevates the production value tenfold if you have musical underscoring in a scene. It just makes it, even without it being musical improv. I know Steve Merritt would always do that naturally, and Chris Levy, like they would just kind of infuse especially for a horror or something, they would give those like tones and eeriness and, musicality to it that just like elevates it so much. So I would say musical underscoring, but any sort of, even a blackout. Some improv theaters don't have blackouts. Like, a blackout just really changes the game as far as like end of a scene, end of a button. So even that would be lovely. But if I had my druthers, yeah, give me some musical underscoring.
Other than laughter, what audience sound do you revel in?
I love gasp, because that means they are invested in what I'm doing, and that means I did something that they didn't expect, which is always really satisfying. So anytime there's like a oh, like a oh snap, like oh no, they didn't just kind of gasp, I think that's always my favorite.
I love that.
I have hosted pun shows with like there's a game show my husband and I host called Pun Slingers. We did encourage a lot of groaning as well to the bad puns, so that equally can be really fun, is like hearing a really bad groan. I'm like, ah, or it's like they want to laugh and they appreciate it, but they feel that they have to groan instead. So
any response you get means they're with you, which is always great.
They were listening. Exactly.
What's the best note you've ever received?
Really honest ones. I am such a theater nerd in that way. I want critique and I want to be better. And so, like, there was a time where I wasn't trusting a player and he, like, made it very uncomfortable in the green room afterwards. But he kind of like laid it out there and was like, yeah, I don't think you trust me on stage because you don't act like, and he kind of like let me know about it. I honestly, like, as much as it was super uncomfortable in the moment, I did appreciate that because I felt like it made me grow. It made he and I kind of confront that kind of miscommunication that we had, and just there were reasons why I didn't feel like I was trusting him, and I felt I had good reason at the time, but I think we were just not on the same page in a lot of scenes. And so then I did, and I have a very unfiltered face, if you recall, as well, in scene work. And so I'm sure he felt he could see that. He could see my judgment of his choices or things like that. So I really appreciated that he kind of called it out so we could work through it. And now, anytime I'm back at SAK and things, like, he and I have great scenes, and I feel like I trust him really, really easily now, and we have great work together. So yeah, I would say that's my favorite. It's when someone's really, really honest. My least favorite, you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you, my least favorite is when at the end of a show, everyone just goes, "Oh, great show. All right, we're out. Let's go." I love notes. I want all the notes. I want to talk through everything. I want to have my own notes that I shared. Like I really want to dig in. And so when I have like a list of notes in my mind for every scene that I want to talk through, and then whoever's in charge is just like, "Oh, all right, so we're moving on. Bye." Like, that was good enough. I'm like, "No, we can be better. We can do better. Like, this is good."
Yeah.
So that's my least favorite note, is like, all good.
Well, you beat me to it because it was the next question.
Oh, okay, good.
What is the worst venue you've ever played in?
Ooh, bar prov.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst. No fun for anybody. There was a little bar that we performed at on occasion, a little group, and it's not conducive to any good work. It's really, really, really hard. And I mean, if you were doing it almost as like a workshop opportunity, that's one thing, but when it is for the purpose of like getting some sort of like audience feedback, then it's just not helpful, in my opinion. Like, I'm sure I am just too snobby for my own good at this point with improv, because I was really fortunate to get SAK early on and everything, and so I had a beautiful theater with a great audience often, and so I got very, very spoiled to that. And so anytime I would step outside of that kind of like perfect setting, it gets really hard. Actually, this just reminded me of a corporate gig we did once. That was the worst show ever, I think. We got pulled off halfway through the show during the corporate gig because it was at Hard Rock City Walk in Orlando, but they had set the tables really far back away from the stage, so there was probably a 30-foot, 40-foot gap in between us and the audience. It was a smallish audience, probably like 30-ish, 40 people, and they had been, in workshop seminars all day, and then they were just ready to eat food, and it was running late. And I mean, it was so many bad things set up where it's a beautiful venue, a beautiful stage, and it was me and a couple of other like really seasoned improvisers, and we were doing our thing, and they were not feeling it because they barely could hear us, I think, and didn't care, and they just wanted to talk to their friends, and so we got pulled off like halfway through, and it was like, okay. Not the best setting for a performance, but you do what you do.
Yeah, it sounds like you were just doing improv in the same room as people who were wanting to eat.
Correct. We were just a nuisance, I think, to them more than anything. We did a few scenes. We were doing okay, but it was just like, I think they even started late too, and we were like, okay, we're going to do this show again, so it was, some of those corporate gigs are very sterile environments, especially compared to an improv theater location, and so some of the corporate events can have a more sterile feeling, but you just kind of have to not let that affect you most times. You just kind of like push through that sort of emptier kind of feeling. Different people laugh at different things when they're all part of a similar group and they have a similar mindset, so it is its own little unique beast, corporate gigs. But that was one for the books there.
What's surprising is how many quotes from that Hard Rock show are actually underneath the New York Times quote in the SAK space.
I'm sure. That is very surprising.
A lot of, what? Question mark?
I can't hear you over the noise on stage, I think was another one.
If there were Academy Awards for everything improv, which would you be nominated for?
I think I do a really good job of continuing a narrative and continuing a story in a scene. So I would say like pushing the scene forward would be what I consider I'm most proud of. And that I would receive an Academy Award for pushing a scene forward in the category of pushing a scene forward.
So the award for best blank goes to Ana. What would the blank be?
Yeah, so the Academy Award for pushing the story forward. That sounds really lame, but pushing the story forward, Ana Hammersley. Ana Eligio Hammersley. I don't even know my name anymore.
Okay, so this might be the same answer then, because this is the next question. If you're remembered 100 years from now for something in improv, what would you want it to be?
I mean, I think the word playful is just what comes to mind. I just hope that people have fun playing with me and that they feel trusted and that they feel that they can trust me to take care of them in a scene. So I think that's what I always want, as I said before. And so I think that would be most ideal for me, is that when people think of playing with it, they're like, I would want them to think, oh yeah, this is going to be a fun scene. We're going to do something fun and playful together, and I'm going to be a partner in this and not bulldozed by Ana and not I can bulldoze Ana. I think being a peer in a scene in that way, that would be what I want.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ana Eligio Hammersley, for being with me for Improv Autopsy. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This is so fun. It's fun to get all nerdy about improv. It's one of my favorite things.
Yay. That's it for this interview with Ana. If you've been enjoying Improv Autopsy, leave us a review wherever you listen. And if you're not a Patreon member, that's where I post bonus content, even for the free tier, like my recent long-distance improv with Charles Fryerman, where he and I attempt his dream cycle format, which is really cool and a lot of fun. More of that to come, I hope, and other tidbits will pop up there from time to time. Check out the show notes for some more information about Ana or myself, and if there's anyone you think I should interview, or if you'd like me to interview you, drop me a line at improvbrain@gmail.com. As always, thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.